Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be looking at the Apostle Paul's journey to Jerusalem, as described in Acts 21 of the New King James Version of the Bible.
Oh, this is going to be an exciting one.
It is. We're going to be unpacking all the warnings that he received, his reactions to those warnings, and then all the events that led up to his arrest in Jerusalem.
It's not a simple trip, though, is it?
No, it's not.
It's a story full of tension and prophecy, and we're going to see a clash between the Jewish Christians and the Gentile Christians in the early church.
Yeah, it really reads like a historical thriller, doesn't it?
It really does.
With all of those warnings and prophecies, and then culminating in this dramatic arrest.
Yeah.
So let's dive right in.
Let's get to it.
So we find Paul returning to Jerusalem after his missionary journeys.
Right.
He's traveling with companions, and they're making stops at different places along the way, like Tyre and Ptolemais.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty standard trip at first glance.
It does, until those prophetic warnings start to show up.
Yeah, and Tyre, some disciples approach Paul and tell him through the Spirit.
Ooh, through the Spirit.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
That he shouldn't go to Jerusalem.
That's fascinating to me because, how would you interpret that?
Well, it suggests that there's some danger ahead for Paul in Jerusalem.
Right.
And it's significant enough to warrant divine intervention.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's a warning that's meant to protect Paul himself. Or maybe his presence in Jerusalem is going to be a catalyst for events that might disrupt the divine plan.
And yet Paul doesn't turn back.
No, he doesn't.
He acknowledges the warnings, but he seems resolute in his decision to go on to Jerusalem.
He does. And he even says, "What do you mean by weeping and breaking my heart? For I am ready not only to be bound, but also to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus."
That's commitment right there.
Wow.
That's serious commitment.
Yeah, for centuries, scholars and theologians have debated the motivations behind Paul's persistence.
Yeah. Why do you think he was so persistent?
Was it a sense of duty to the church in Jerusalem?
Okay.
Or maybe he felt this personal calling that compelled him to continue regardless of the risk.
But I mean, sometimes I feel like that strong sense of conviction could also kind of make it difficult to tell the difference between faith and stubbornness.
That's a good point.
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, it's certainly possible that Paul's unwavering belief in his mission might led him to downplay the dangers or even disregard them.
Right.
He seems convinced that his path lay in Jerusalem no matter what.
And as if those initial warnings weren't enough,
Yeah.
in Caesarea, things escalate with the prophet Agabus.
Oh yeah, Agabus doesn't just verbally warn Paul. He uses a powerful visual aid. He takes Paul's own belt
Oh, wow.
to dramatically act out how Paul will be bound and handed over to the Gentiles in Jerusalem.
That's sending a message.
Isn't it?
Wow, if somebody did that to me, I'd be like, you know what? I think I'm good.
Right.
I don't know if I would have kept going after that.
It's a tough question.
It really is.
It made me pause and reflect.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think it really depends on my understanding of the prophecy
Okay.
and the strength of my convictions and my faith.
Okay, so despite all these warnings, Paul and his companions, they eventually arrive in Jerusalem.
They do.
And initially, he's warmly welcomed by the brethren there.
Right.
But there's an underlying tension
There is, yeah.
kind of bubbling beneath the surface.
Yeah, and that tension really stems from the growing pains of the early Christian church.
Right.
A lot of the Jewish Christians in Jerusalem still felt strongly about adhering to Jewish law and customs, and they had concerns about Paul's teachings to the Gentiles, particularly regarding circumcision and the necessity of following Jewish law for salvation.
It's like two branches of the same faith trying to figure out how to coexist.
Yeah.
Sharing that common foundation, but grappling with different interpretation.
Exactly. It's a classic example of a movement evolving, and you have different factions that are trying to define their identity and establish their own authority within the faith.
Right. So you have those who feel bound to tradition and those who are embracing a more universal, less law-centric approach.
Exactly.
So this tension ultimately leads to a proposed compromise,
It does.
where Paul agrees to undergo a purification ritual with 4 men to demonstrate his respect for Jewish law. It seems like an attempt to bridge that divide and promote unity.
Yeah, do you think it was truly genuine or a strategic move?
That is a great question.
It's a question that's been debated for centuries.
I can see why.
Was it a heartfelt gesture of reconciliation or a calculated tactic to appease the Jewish Christians and avoid further conflict?
It's difficult to say.
Yeah, it's difficult to say for sure.
And it seems like this attempt at unity may not have been as successful as they hoped.
doesn't it?
Remember those Jews from Asia that we mentioned earlier?
The ones who were already critical of Paul's teachings about the Gentile conversions?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They reappear in this scene.
They do.
They spot Paul in the temple, and they don't hesitate to stir up the crowd.
Nope. They started accusing Paul of teaching against the Jewish people and their law.
Wow.
And even of defiling the temple by bringing in Gentiles.
So this whole attempt at peace and unity just backfires.
It does.
It seems like all of that tension just boils over.
Yeah, the scene just descends into chaos and the crowd turns on Paul.
Oh my goodness.
And they seize him and they drag him out of the temple.
Wow.
And they slam the door shut behind him.
And the crowd becomes a full-blown mob.
Yeah, baying for his blood.
It's amazing how quickly things can just spiral out of control.
Yeah, isn't it?
It makes you wonder how much of it was driven by genuine theological differences.
Right.
Versus just like pre-existing prejudices and cultural misunderstandings.
Yeah, it's a complex situation, undoubtedly influenced by multiple factors.
Yeah.
You have deep-seated religious beliefs, fear of change, maybe even political motivations.
Wow.
All likely played a part in this explosive turn of events.
Well, thankfully, a Roman commander intervenes and rescues Paul from the mob.
But just as he's about to be taken into the barracks, Paul makes a rather intriguing request.
What's that?
He asks the commander, "Can you speak Greek?"
It's a curious moment, isn't it?
It is.
It's like a sudden shift in focus.
Yeah.
You go from this chaos of the mob to this one-on-one exchange between Paul and the commander.
It feels very deliberate.
It does.
Like Paul is thinking ahead and strategizing his next move.
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
Remember, Paul's a Roman citizen,
Right?
and he knows how to navigate the complexities of the Roman legal system.
Yeah.
So maybe this question is his way of asserting his rights and ensuring a fair hearing.
So instead of just reacting to the mob, he's taking control of the situation.
Exactly. He's thinking strategically, even in this incredibly tense situation.
Yeah.
He's looking for common ground.
Yeah, and it also highlights those cultural dynamics at play here. Because you've got the commander representing that Roman authority, and he's likely more comfortable with Greek.
Right, the language of administration and power.
Right. And yet Paul deliberately addressed the crowd earlier in Hebrew, demonstrating his connection to his Jewish heritage.
It adds another layer of complexity to the situation.
Doesn't it?
And it underscores those cultural and political tensions that are woven throughout the story.
For sure.
So we end this section of Acts 21 with Paul's question hanging in the air.
We do.
And we're left wondering, what will he say to the commander? How will he navigate this really precarious situation?
Right.
Will he be able to clear his name and continue his mission?
It's a classic cliffhanger that leaves us wanting more.
It does.
But it also serves as a reminder that faith is rarely a passive journey.
Right.
It often requires courage and resilience.
Yeah.
And a willingness to engage with those who oppose us.
Paul's journey is full of obstacles and opposition.
Right.
Yet he never gives up.
He doesn't.
He uses every opportunity to speak his truth, even when facing danger and persecution.
His story is an invitation for us to reflect on our own responses to challenges.
That's a good point.
Do we shy away from conflict, or do we embrace it as an opportunity for growth and understanding?
That is a great question.
Yeah, it's a question worth pondering as we delve deeper into this incredible journey.
Yes, it is.
So,
it is.
Join us next time
For part 2,
as we continue to explore
Paul's journey
to Jerusalem.
See you then.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Paul's journey to Jerusalem.
Yeah, last time we left off, Paul was standing before a hushed crowd ready to speak
He was.
after gaining permission from the Roman commander.
Right, but instead of hearing that speech right away, the narrative kind of takes an unexpected turn.
It does.
Yeah, we learn that the commander doesn't actually speak Hebrew,
Right.
and he's pretty surprised to discover that Paul is fluent in Greek.
And he even assumes that Paul is the Egyptian rebel he's been looking for.
He does.
It really highlights that cultural and linguistic diversity of the Roman Empire, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Jerusalem at this time was a major crossroads of trade and culture. So it would have been a real melting pot of languages and nationalities.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to see all these different worlds colliding in this story.
It is.
And you know, it's interesting to think about Paul's ability to navigate those different spheres.
Yeah.
He seamlessly switches between Hebrew and Greek, demonstrating his fluency in both languages
Yeah.
and his understanding of the different audiences that he needs to address.
It really speaks to his adaptability and his strategic thinking.
It does.
He understands how important it is to connect with people on their own terms,
Right.
using language as a bridge rather than a barrier.
So even though we don't get to hear Paul's speech to the crowd in this chapter,
Right.
the text does give us a glimpse into his resourcefulness
It does.
and his understanding of the Roman legal system.
Uh-huh.
He knows his rights as a Roman citizen,
He does.
and he's not afraid to assert them.
Exactly. He's not just a passionate preacher, he's a strategic thinker.
Right.
Someone who can navigate these complex situations
Yeah.
and use the system to his advantage.
And that's a valuable lesson for us, too.
It is.
Standing up for what we believe in often requires more than just passion and conviction.
Yeah.
You need wisdom and discernment,
Mhm.
and a willingness to engage with those structures and systems that shape our world.
Paul's story reminds us that faith isn't just about personal beliefs.
Right.
It's about living those beliefs out in the real world,
Yes.
engaging with different cultures and perspectives, and working within those existing systems to bring about positive change.
So even though Acts 21 ends on a note of suspense,
He does.
leaving us wanting to know what happens next,
Yeah.
it also provides us with a powerful example of how faith can be lived out in those practical and strategic ways.
It challenges us to think about how we can use our own unique gifts and skills to make a difference in the world,
Yes.
even when we're facing opposition and adversity.
So what stands out to you about this section?
Oh, I think this whole journey to Jerusalem is so much more than just a travelogue. It's really a microcosm of the struggles that the early church faced.
Yeah, like that clash between tradition and evolving beliefs,
Exactly.
and the challenges of trying to reconcile diverse cultures within a shared faith.
Yeah, and that constant threat of persecution
Right.
that loomed over the early Christians.
It also raises some questions about individual purpose and conviction.
It does.
Like, why did Paul feel so strongly about going to Jerusalem, despite all those warnings and risks?
Was it stubbornness?
Right.
Or was it unwavering faith?
Or a deeper sense of divine calling that he just couldn't ignore?
It's hard to say.
It is. And what about those warnings that he received?
Right.
Did he just disregard them?
Or did he see them as challenges that he needed to face head on?
Yeah.
Obstacles to overcome in pursuit of a greater purpose?
You know, it makes me think about those times in our own lives
Yeah.
when we're faced with those really tough choices.
Uh-huh.
And we have to decide whether to heed warnings or push forward,
Yeah.
despite the risk.
Yeah. What are the things that compel us to keep going?
What drives our decisions even when we're facing opposition?
It's a question that resonates across time, isn't it?
It does.
Whether it's Paul in the first century
Yeah.
or someone grappling with a really difficult decision today.
We're all faced with those moments where we have to weigh our convictions against the potential consequences.
And we can't forget about those who opposed Paul so vehemently.
Right. What were their motivations?
Were they genuinely concerned for their traditions?
Uh-huh.
Or was there something else going on?
Like prejudice or
Yeah.
fear of change, or maybe even political agendas disguised as religious objections.
It's a reminder that human motivations are rarely simple
Right.
or straightforward.
Yeah. Our actions are often influenced by a really complex interplay of
Social, cultural, and even political factors.
Yeah, and understanding those underlying currents
Mm.
can be so crucial to navigating conflict and finding common ground.
It's true.
You know, this section of Acts 21 really encourages us to look beyond the surface, to delve into those nuances of faith and conviction and the complexities of human interaction.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with a lot to ponder as we move forward.
It does.
What will Paul say to the crowd?
Right.
How will he navigate the legal and political complexities of the situation? Will he be able to fulfill his mission?
Despite all those obstacles that he's encountered.
Well, you'll have to join us for part 3 to find out.
That's right. See you then. Welcome back to our deep dive into Acts 21.
Yeah.
Last time we left off with Paul standing at a crossroads, ready to address the crowd
Right.
after receiving permission from the Roman commander.
But remember, the commander didn't understand Hebrew.
Right.
So he's pretty surprised to discover that Paul can speak fluent Greek.
He is.
And it highlights the diversity of languages and cultures in the Roman Empire at that time.
Yeah. Jerusalem was like a central hub for so many different people and cultures.
Exactly. And Paul demonstrates his ability to navigate these different cultural spheres.
Right. He transitions smoothly between Hebrew and Greek, showing his fluency in both.
Exactly. And his understanding of how to best connect with different audiences.
Yeah. It's pretty impressive.
It is. He's not just a passionate preacher,
Right.
but he's also strategic and adaptable.
Exactly.
He knows how to use language to build bridges instead of creating barriers.
And we also see in this section how Paul understands the Roman legal system and his rights as a Roman citizen.
Uh-huh. He's not afraid to assert those rights either.
Nope, he knows how to work within the system to his advantage.
That's something we can learn from too, you know?
Yeah, it is. Sometimes you need to be able to do that to stand up for what you believe in.
You have to be wise and discerning.
Right, and understand the power structures at play.
And be willing to engage with them.
Exactly, even if it's not always comfortable.
Right. Paul's story shows us that faith isn't just about personal beliefs. It's also about taking action.
Yeah, and engaging with the world around us.
Right, and working towards positive change, even within systems that might seem opposed to our values.
So even though Acts 21 ends on a cliffhanger, it also leaves us with this really powerful image of Paul as this really resourceful and strategic individual.
He's ready to face whatever challenges come his way.
Exactly, and I think that's something we can all relate to in our own lives.
We all have those moments when we have to stand up for what we believe in.
Right.
And navigate difficult situations.
And even though we might not always know what the future holds,
we can find strength and inspiration from Paul's example.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive into Acts 21.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey.
It really has.
Exploring the challenges and triumphs of Paul's journey to Jerusalem.
And how his experiences can offer guidance and encouragement for our own lives.
Exactly.
We encourage you to keep exploring this story in the following chapters of Acts.
Yeah, you'll see how Paul navigates the complexities of his arrest and trial.
And how his unwavering commitment to his mission inspires those around him.
And maybe even challenge you to think about your own journey of faith.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us.
It's been great.
See you next time.
Bye.